This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1512, Spotlight on Daredevil in the Bronze Age.
Opinions like the seasons on everything you read in comics, movies, games, toys, artists, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek. Uniting the world's mightiest heroes. This is...
I'm Brian Chrisman.
I'm Shane Kelly.
I'm Adam Murdo. I'm Chris Eberley.
And I'm Kevin Moyer.
And welcome to the show. It's been a while since we did the first, it wasn't on the episode, since we did the first Daredevil Spotlight.
Back in April, yep.
Yes, back in April, episode 1472. Did the Spotlight on Daredevil Silver. It's now over 6 months later, and we're just picking up. Oh, well, good things come to those who wait.
That's
yes.
right. That's right.
So, once again, this is going to be a continuing series of Spotlights on Daredevil.
Absolutely.
Because this is Daredevil's 50th anniversary of its first publication in 1964.
We'll probably bleed into next year, but we'll get them done. Yeah.
Well,
we got 2 whole months of the anniversary to go here.
We've never done that before.
we're not on a schedule necessarily. We do whatever we want to. We're freewheeling here and fancy
Footloose and fancy
footloose
free.
and fancy free, easy for you to say.
Free.
So we're going to cover the Bronze Age in this episode, which I think, Mr. Eberley, you have from
Issues 81 to 157, so that's about 1972 to 1979. We're going to stop right before Frank Miller comes on the book, because even though Miller does start in 79, as well as his first Daredevil rendering in Spectacular Spider-Man, that's such a dramatic change in the book, I just thought it was a good place to stop, because when you think of Miller and Daredevil, you think automatically of the 1980s, basically.
Right,
so,
right.
So we're going to cut it off.
Excellent. All right.
First, this episode is sponsored by InStockTrades.com. Go to InStock Trades for your trade paperback and hardback ordering needs. Look on their website. Their main page always has specials on. Right now, there's save up to 60% on select Marvel titles. There's a thank you sale number 5 for everybody putting up with them as they moved. So there's always some good stuff in the thank you sales. DC has save up to 60% on select titles as well. There's American Vampire Trades still on sale, volumes 1 through 5 at 45% off. Their top 10, I always like looking at their top 10 list. Number 10 of the best sellers right now is Ms. Marvel Trade Paperback Volume 1. Number 9 is Wonder Woman Volume 5. All New X-Men hardcover number 1 is number 8. I kind of wonder if that's not the expanded one, bigger version that they came out with. Alias Omnibus back in print is number 7. Manhattan Projects number 1 is number 6. Volume 1 is number 6. I can't wait to see this. The Blocksod Armadillo hardcover. Amarillo. Jeez, can't read. Amarillo hardcover is number 5.
You can find both of them in Texas.
Yes.
And they'll be on sale at Wild Pig Comics for our sale, which already happened when this was recorded.
That's correct. You're messing with the time stream again, sir.
Here we go. Moon Knight Epic Collection trade paperback Bad Moon Rising is number 4. Number 3 is Southern Bastards trade paperback Volume 1. Moon Knight trade paperback Volume 1 is number 2. And the Batman hardcover Volume 5 0 Year Dark City is number 1. That surprises me.
Look at that.
Excellent.
Moon Knight holding 2 of the top
2
4
of the top 10.
That's awesome.
So go to InStockTrades.com for pre-ordering trades and hardbacks. Great company, and I get stuff from them whenever they have good sales.
Because if it's on their site,
it's in stock.
It's in stock. All right. Well, I was not on the first episode.
I don't think I was either.
No, neither one of you were here.
However, I did listen to it. Actually, listened to it at the airport in Seattle when I was out there for Emerald City. Or did I? No, I couldn't have, because that happened.
That happened after.
I was at
now you're playing with the time stream.
But I was in airports. Oh, I was in Minnesota when I listened to it. That's where I was in an airport. I listened to it anyway. Very good as usual. So this is going to be just our thoughts. Chris has given an amazing outline ready to go through for these issues. Since I was on the first episode, I'll sort of give you my Daredevil-ish background, if you will.
Please.
I can remember when I was a lad, I had the Son of Origins,
absolutely,
as well as the Marvel, the Origins of Marvel Universe. Marvel Comics, but I had the Son of Orange in Marvel Comics, which actually featured Daredevil. So I know at some point during that era, I read the first issue, which is in this book, as well as issue 47, Brother Take My Hand.
Oh.
So that was my first exposure to the character. In the 70s, I was getting comics, again, I was a lad, off the newsstand willy-nilly. I might have had an issue or two here or there, nothing consecutive at all. When I got back into comics in the late 80s, early 90s, I was focused on DC, didn't really get into Daredevil or Marvel at all. But when Kevin Smith came on the book and it was announced, that's when I started reading it. I stayed with the book through that entire run of Kevin Smith, through Bendis, through the whole run. Even read Shadowland for this very own podcast, and that's what killed it for me at that point. After
Shadowland was subpar, to say the
it
least.
did. So when they relaunched with Mark Waid, I didn't even want to read it. But
I hope you did, Pants.
Well, let me finish, sir.
All right.
But when I heard so many raves for it, I got the first issue, and I got several of the other issues after that at one of your Wild Pig sales.
Honored.
So I'm back on Daredevil, read that whole Mark Waid, I'm caught up. And actually have gone back and bought quite a lot of the back issues.
Yeah, you've been snapping those up like they're going out of style.
Yes. So I have let's see, there's 380 issues of the first run, plus annuals, maybe a dozen, 13 annuals, maybe more than that annuals.
Yeah, around there or something.
So I
don't think there's that many. But
I've got 306 issues of Daredevil, including the annuals. And of this era we're talking, I'm only missing 20 issues.
Wow.
So, but now, of course, the problem is I haven't read them all. God. So, but I wanted to be on this episode because I love these spotlights. I'm really enjoying Daredevil. I want to just read these things, and this will sort of, because when we do these, when I've already read them, I want to go back and read these again, like these other spotlights we've done. I just love, because there's so much history in these books. I just love this stuff. So I'm looking forward to the discussion here.
Now, my start with Daredevil.
Oh, and I'm sorry, but I did go back and read all of Miller's Daredevil through all the Visionary trades.
Look forward to having you
So
on the 80s one then.
I've read those already.
Excellent.
I don't think I read more than an issue here or there when it crossed over or looked neat that I would pull off the shelf until Kevin Smith came on Daredevil. That's when I started reading it. And then I stuck with that until Bendis and who did the art?
Malev.
Till they came on it, which I know most of you all love.
Oh, it's amazing.
I dropped it then.
Ooh.
I couldn't stand the artwork. And,
But I did get you that
but you did, which I still have on the shelf I haven't read. And then I've never read Miller's run at all.
Oh.
So I have some of that stuff to read.
Oh,
that
Shane.
We were
Have
talking
you
about
not read Born Again?
Nope, never.
Oh. I haven't read Born Again either. I think I only read the Visionary stories. I don't think Born Again was in there.
no, Born Again was not in the Visionaries, but
But then after hearing Pants talk about when Wade came onto the book, I started getting the hardbacks of that. And I read the first two or three, and they are fantastic. So I have the rest of those to read, and I keep up with the trades and hardbacks of those as they come out. But that's really, really Kevin Smith's where I started reading Daredevil.
that's interesting to hear that both of you started at that time.
Yeah.
Actually, a lot of people I've talked to over the years have a similar story where, because of Kevin Smith, that kind of got them into Daredevil.
Well, and at that time, was Green Arrow after that or
It was
before?
after that.
Yeah, it was after that.
Yeah, it was really just Kevin Smith writing a book. I'm like, oh, well, that might be interesting. I wonder what he's going to do with it. Is really all it was.
And it almost didn't happen.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to the discussion, looking forward to Chris's copious notes, looking forward to Kevin, who's actually
Thrilled Kevin's here. Thank you, sir.
back again for Daredevil.
Thanks for having me.
And Murd and his notes so small, only he can read them. Look at that.
Oh, it's amazing, ladies and gentlemen.
He's got a pen and
Micro
a yellow
dot inscription.
and a yellow legal pad. Oh, this is the best thing since indoor plumbing.
How many?
It's the Palmer process.
How many?
The what process?
The Palmer process.
Ray Palmer.
I had to use white dwarf matter to shrink my hand down
Into
to
the
write
pen.
this.
Yeah.
How many lines?
I need to
of
see that again, Murd. Show me that again here.
How many lines of writing do you get on a line of
There we
line?
go.
Is it like you got 2 lines?
Impressive.
That's amazing.
2 lines of writing between each thin blue line on the legal
And
pad.
that's college ruled, folks.
Dear
Yes.
Lord.
All right.
Wow.
I'm sorry. Was there anything else before we get started?
No.
No, I'm going to sit back and enjoy
we're just
everybody else
warming up.
talking.
Well, I mean, I'm going to jump in when I can with my usual idiotic
Well,
questions.
Pants,
but,
you've probably read some of these issues if you've been reading
I-
Daredevil lately.
well,
You would know.
I wouldn't. I don't. This I haven't read. I don't think much from this era. I like I said, I started that I know with the Daredevil Visionary books with Miller, I might have read a sporadic issue or
But
two
you have a
here.
lot of these, obviously.
I have
Yeah.
all but 20, the ones we're going to talk about in this episode.
You've bought several of them twice.
Yeah, I've done that too. But again, like I can't in my mind. It's like I can't read them until I have them all collected. It's like, ugh.
I understand that mindset.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure you do. So, Mr. Eberley, Professor Eberley, if you would start us out, please.
Honored. I'm glad my co-professor Kevin is here because I was listening to our Silver Age episode on the way here to refresh.
Okay.
Kevin's knowledge is outstanding, and I'm really glad you're here, sir.
Well,
'cause you're
thank you. I'm
consummate-
glad it worked out. Yes.
Consummate Daredevil fan.
I appreciate it.
So again, we're doing the Bronze Age, issues 81 to 157. So right on the cusp of Frank Miller's sort of earth-shaking debut in the Daredevil title. This era I was in many ways looking forward to the most because I think it's so overshadowed by what came before it and then the Miller run after it. And it's as I was refreshing my memory in a lot of these issues and leafing through some of them and reading about them, this era, Kevin, I think you'll agree, is so quirky.
Oh, yeah. Without a
And
doubt.
all over the map.
Yeah.
Because you have a whole series of different writers in this period. You've got Jerry Conway.
Yeah, I'd forgotten because
yeah.
Jerry Conway didn't do. I'm sorry again for jumping in.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Obviously known better for Spider-Man,
Yes.
but started out early even with Thor. I think early on in his career at Marvel.
He came over from DC when he did some horror work when he was a teenager,
right.
and then he came over to Marvel, and he was doing. He's doing a lot of titles simultaneously.
Right.
So their work on Daredevil and Spider-Man are very close together, if not almost simultaneous. So you have Conway. You've got Marv Wolfman. Actually, got Conway, Steve Gerber, Marv Wolfman, Jim Shooter, Roger McKenzie. These are the writers we're going to be touching upon, and that's quite a lineup there. Especially the first three, who I think are all great comic book writers who've all done a lot of important work. And then you have a whole different host of artists. I mean, Gene Colan, we talked about in the last episode. He was doing Daredevil, I don't know, from the early double digits probably,
Yes.
I would imagine.
Yes.
All the way to issue 100 and then some sporadic issues after that, which we're going to talk about. And then after that, kind of in keeping with the sort of the quirky era, you have a lot of different artists involved in this. Rich Buckler does some work.
Bob Brown.
The late Bob Brown, does about a 30-issue run before he actually dies of leukemia in 1977. Colan jumps back in there
Yeah,
at
he
different
comes
times.
back,
There's even one with Sam Queskin. He does an issue.
You
There's
have some Gil Kane. and-
Gil Kane comes in. Kane was doing covers throughout he was like Roy Thomas's go-to cover guy.
Exactly.
But he does come in and does some internal art in Daredevil in the 70s
And
as
Jansen
well.
Klaus Jansen actually inked him.
That's
on
right.
some of those are some of the cool issues
Yeah.
that stand out for me in this run.
There's a Bullseye appearance in that, too. So this is an era that I think it's overshadowed, but I also think it's important. I think there's a lot of good stories in this era. And I think one of the most significant aspects of it is, A, the Black Widow, because we now... Go ahead, Pants.
I don't want to interrupt you.
No, I'm not. Please, sir.
but
please.
you did.
I gestured and he stopped. Is what happened. But yeah,
That's because of my awe of you.
because now again, from my limited understanding, she actually joins the title and is in the masthead of the
She
title.
is-
Yeah, they literally put her in
Yep.
the title.
She is on the title Daredevil and the Black Widow. It's actually I can tell you right here.
issue 92.
It's
it looks
issue 92 through issue 108.
like. Right.
Yeah.
Is Daredevil and the Black Widow. Even after that, they remove her name, but they still have her in the little corner symbol on the right side
Yeah.
for several sporadic issues. So Matt and she, of course, become a romantic couple. Matt goes to San Francisco with her, where he tries to practice law there and to adventure as Daredevil. So, and that's tied into the Daredevil right now because
Yes.
he's returned to San Francisco because
Yep.
he had some roots there essentially. So the book takes a total shift in tone, in its setting, and also because there's so many different writers involved. Each writer, of course, has their own take on the character. Like Gerber gets, because it's Gerber. You've got like fantastical villains showing up. You've got cosmic stuff like Moondragon makes her first appearance, which I'm sure Murd will talk about.
Well, not her first appearance.
I thought it was her. No, it wasn't her first. I
No,
apologize.
No, she was a Starlin creation. She was a part
That's
of that
right.
whole Iron Man story that also
Okay.
gave us Mentor.
That's
and-
right.
But she
thank
was
you.
still the she was still a villain in this run.
Yeah, she was playing the role of the villain.
Yeah,
anyway.
Madame McEvil.
Exactly.
So Moondragon will appear. We're going to have, Mr. Klein with that whole storyline from the Silver Age that continues into the Bronze.
Yep.
The Karen Page kind of peters out
Right.
as a supporting character. In fact, she comes back one last time, and there's a very, very, very brief marriage engagement, and then she goes back to her ill-fated acting career. So she kind of fades out of the book on this time period. Heather Glenn comes in.
Who's Heather Glenn?
Heather Glenn is Matt's love interest in the late 70s and early 80s.
Okay.
Who like
I don't believe I ever heard of her before.
like most of the women.
Well,
who,
she
go
was
ahead.
very predominant in the Miller run.
Yes.
So that's why you.
It's been a while since I've read that.
Yeah, that was in that run where she was really up front as,
Yeah.
Okay.
as a supporting character.
And like most of the women in Matt's life, she will be a tragic character.
Oh yeah, the women in the women in Matt Murdock's life. From what little I know about him, holy God, this guy got around, didn't he?
He got around. There's even a brief love triangle here between Moondragon, the Black Widow, and Daredevil. So,
Man, I got to read these issues right away. Good gosh almighty.
but
Gotta give him credit.
yeah, it's. But I think what I want to emphasize to listeners is that even though the book has a lot of different tone changes because there's different creative teams, and Kevin mentioned this in the last episode. The book was in danger of cancellation at a couple different times in the 1970s.
Yeah.
It might have even gone bi-monthly.
It did go bi-monthly at
one
a point. Yeah.
But it's still really fun, and there's a lot of good stories in here. And the stuff between Matt and the Black Widow is really, really enjoyable, and they really build, their relationship, and they have the vicissitudes of it and the problems they have.
I'm sorry.
The ups and downs, my friend.
Thank you. Dumb it down for
Yes.
pants.
Again, he went third person. I love when he goes Bob Dole like that. So this is a run of Daredevil that's important, and it should be celebrated and acknowledged, just because it gets overshadowed. But there's still elements of it that still reverberate today. And we mentioned before in our pre-air discussion about the Daredevil Netflix show. Probably not initially, but I hope eventually they do actually maybe bring the Black Widow into that, which I think would be incredibly cool.
Absolutely.
They'll probably do Elektra first, would be my guess. But this is a really fun era. I'm looking forward to discussing it.
Yeah.
My friend?
I agree. I mean, quirky is the best way to describe this run. I mean, it is all over the place. I mean, that's why I made the joke when you said about reading these, and I don't remember if I read any of these or not. And that's why I said you would know, because some of this stuff. I mean, some of the stuff literally is kind of off the wall. I mean, it is.
Mandrill?
Yeah.
Merv is already grinning.
Well, it was the 70s, and there was a little bit of the funny stuff going on in the offices, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it suffered. I shouldn't say it suffered. That's not the right term. But I mean, it is a reflection of the rotation of the creative teams that were on the book in this time frame that we're reviewing at this time, and everybody. I mean, it's not like you said. You were talking before about how you read Kevin Smith's run, and then you went into reading the Bendis stuff. And you kept. It wasn't fluent as even though you had a change of tone, and what I mean, but. This stuff is kind of like, man, it almost like hits you. It's like, from going to the great stuff with the interactions with him and Black Widow and being in San Francisco, and then him coming back to New York and stuff. And next thing you know, you're hit with cosmic stuff, Daredevil and cosmic storylines, and it's like,
Wow.
it's just like it really is abrupt in a way. It's not, but there is gems in the run.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and that happened on every comic title. I mean, I don't care what character it is. In this time frame, there's times where every character suffered from, that they've had off times.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean? It's not everybody's, but so. But this is just a period of a good amount of creators coming in and doing their take on the character. And obviously, the book was struggling, so I think they were open to, having people try something different, to see what would stick.
And whenever that happens, you get great stuff and stuff that's forgettable.
Yeah, there's always that risk,
We should also remember that this era introduced Bullseye,
yes.
who becomes one of Daredevil's most important
and that is
adversaries.
one of the most significant, things in this run. And that was Marv Wolfman.
Yes, it was.
And that I give props to him, because that's why I was grateful to see him on the book. And obviously, like, he gave us Bullseye. So what else can you ask? So. But yeah, it's some cool stuff, and it's some really off the wall stuff. So. But it's still, some of my favorite stuff is in here. The whole Black Widow and San Francisco stuff. I love.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. I mean, I didn't think I was going to like it, but between the relationship that was established between them and how well it was written had me intrigued. And he was fighting Electro and, people like that in there. But what really hooked me was Gene Colan's drawing of Daredevil in San Francisco.
Yeah.
I mean, he literally, and these creators actually went out to San Francisco to
Really?
Yeah. To get a grasp as to what it was.
Colan did that for Tomb of Dracula too. He went to Boston and
Yep.
took photographs.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
I'm
okay.
telling you.
I did not know that.
And you can see it because when you look at Gene Colan's drawings, I mean, to me, in this run where he goes to San Francisco is just as prominent character as New York is in the other
Yeah,
Marvel
absolutely.
titles. I mean, you can just, there's images and there's some of my favorite images of Daredevil, like one with he's on the Golden Gate Bridge and it's a great bird's eye perspective, and it's something that stuck with me so predominantly. I mean, it's just so good.
I read a quote while I was preparing for this from Jerry Conway, where he was saying how he'd just been to San Francisco and he thought the environment was perfect for a character like Daredevil. He really liked the area. And he decided it would be fun to introduce him into that new environment. So
It was, and that was one of the things that it was a shot because I mean, what other character has
he was the first Marvel superhero to headquarter outside New York
exactly.
City. Yeah.
So I mean, this was something that wasn't we look at it today and go, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But that time, you're taking a prominent character and he's out in New York City, and every Marvel character is in New York City. So it was different. But it was a shot in the dark. It was one of the things they threw against the wall and it stuck. It was a great idea.
And they threw a lot of. And I'm looking forward to Merd's take. Some of Marvel's, I think, quirkiest villains:
Oh yeah,
Man-Bull, Mandrill,
Angar the Screamer,
Angar the Screamer, which is just fantastic.
Madam McEvil, and
The Indestructible Man, and there's some really funky, wacky stuff going on in this era.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to the discussion. Pat, do you have any more initial questions, my friend?
No, I don't. Well, okay. Wait.
Please.
Did either of you two read these books at the time they were being published?
No, I did not.
Okay, because I know you're sort of in that age
I was a
group.
little too young.
Okay, sort of
I
close.
read a lot of them in the 1980s when I found a lot of cheap back issues.
Okay,
So
okay.
most of the stories we're going to talk about, I've read. I mean, a lot of them I haven't read in many, many years, but I've read most of them at some point
Okay.
or another.
Yeah,
Very
I've
good.
read them. I just didn't read them while they were taking
Okay.
place. So I had exposure to Daredevil, very very limited. But when I really started to take notice to him was when Colan came back right before Miller came on the book.
Yes.
Those I had a couple issues, like he was fighting Cobra and Hyde
Yep.
and some of that stuff, and that's when it really got me to sit up and take notice. And I was grateful for that because obviously then what transpired afterwards, it just went from there. But yeah, when this run was going on, I really wasn't that aware of it. I was still mainly focused on Spider-Man. I really wasn't.
Well, to piggyback that, have you both read every Daredevil issue in his main title?
In the 380 issues plus,
Yeah.
yes, I have.
Yes. Not in order. Some back
No, just
issues, but yeah, I've read them all.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, when we talk about when we get to the 90s, that's going to be
Yeah, let's not get ahead of
that's
ourselves.
going to be tough. There's some good moments, but that's going to be
Yeah,
tough.
Well, it's kind of similar, basically,
yeah.
when you're talking about when you get into that run and compared to this Bronze Age run. It's quirky, but there's some good stuff in it, But we'll get to that
Yeah.
then. But let's.
The first time I ever read or collected Daredevil was Fall from Grace. So
Oh, wow. Like 320.
Smack dab in the 90s.
Yeah, that was 319
Might
to
have been the
325.
first issue I bought was
Yeah.
Fall from Grace.
yeah, 319 sounds familiar. It's
Yeah,
like
319 was the start of Fall from Grace, and it ended at 325.
Okay.
the prologue, which was kind of a hot collector's item for a couple
Yeah.
of months there.
Yeah,
a couple of months.
But, yeah,
And then it fell
So
away.
indicative of the comic book
so
market.
well put.
So,
and I was born at about the end of the period we're going to be discussing here. So
January 1st, 1979.
that is correct, sir. So suffice to say, I'm going to be just sitting in the lecture hall listening to you guys holding forth.
Well, Murray, you have some copious notes there. I'm looking forward to
I
it.
have notes, yeah, but I have no real first-hand experience with Daredevil in the 70s.
Understood.
Must admit.
Yeah, I have no notes and no first-hand experience.
Well, Murd, knowing your likes and dislikes, a lot of these stories you would get a huge kick out of. There's no question in my mind.
I could see that.
Absolutely.
That's a
So-
good assessment. But it's nice to understand. I mean, it's always been with the show, and I still agree the same thing. Even though that, like Shane, you said, I have no notes and I have no recollection of reading these stories. But it's nice to you still be part because when we talk about it, it like with Pants, it raises questions. You never know. You know what I mean? There's something you may So
I always enjoy listening to you guys.
So you never know. I mean,
lament about this stuff.
Yeah. Good to have an open mind.
Let's dive into the checklist.
Let's
Joe
go.
Fancy? All right.
Yeah, let's go.
Well, we left off. We stopped at issue 80, and there was a cliffhanger because at the end of issue 80, Daredevil is in conflict with one of his classic rogues gallery, the Owl, and they are struggling on board the Owl's helicopter, and it crashes in New York Harbor. Karen Page is watching. She assumes Matt has been killed. Remember, Karen knows that Matt is Daredevil,
Yes.
and this is what has driven them apart multiple times, and she just can't commit to him because she just can't handle his alter ego and the dangers that are inherent with that. At the same time, that the shadowy, enigmatic Mr. Klein, we talked about in the last episode, is still trying to manipulating events behind the scene. He's hiring different thugs to sort of carry out his machinations. So that's still unfolding. And Karen is also drawing closer to her Hollywood agent, who's named Phil, who's clearly taken with her and, is trying to lure her away from her tumultuous feelings for Matt. So, and I have to say at this point, because I reread some of these stories just recently, Karen's dialogue is such classic bad romance comic dialogue at this point. It's almost funny. She's just, oh, Phil, I shouldn't, and he's just torn between. It's Karen Page has not really done justice until we get into the 1980s as a character with real depth to her.
Yeah. Torn between two lovers.
Depends on your definition of justice, I suppose. She may achieve depth, but she's also not. She's not treated with kindness.
No, that's very true, my friend.
No.
That's very true.
No,
very true. So in issue 81, now just a little bit of Marvel history. And many of you are probably familiar with this. This is the 1 month where Marvel did the 25-cent covers in the Bronze Age. So they had the thicker, glue-bound. For 1 month, they raised the price to 25 cents. Martin Goodman was in a cunning price war with DC. And DC also raised their price. Pants, there was about a year where DC had the 25-cent covers in the early 1970s. You look befuddled, my friend.
Well, I take your word for it. Top of my head, I can't.
Yeah, you have them. You probably have them
well,
all.
Yeah,
you probably
I probably do have them all. Yes.
So
haven't read them either.
So that one month, those Marvel books are highly collectible, especially in high grade, because whenever you have, as you know, the glue-bound spine, it's much easier for those books to become damaged. Almost every Marvel title had it was a thicker number of pages. It was 25 cents. Then Goodman dropped his books down to 20 cents. DC stayed at 25, and then Marvel. That's one of the ways that Marvel then actually outfought DC at that time in terms of rack space and sell through numbers, because Goodman went the price up, and then he dropped it down a nickel, giving the illusion that Marvel was now cheaper, even though he had actually raised the book from 15 cents to 25 cents. He brought it back down to 20 cents.
Because it didn't go back up to 25 until like 76 or something.
And DC stayed with the 25 cents for quite a while, and apparently they took a bath on that.
Yeah.
But for the readers, you got one glorious month where you had thicker Marvel comics with original material in them, because they weren't reprints for the most part. They might have had some in the back, but that were 25 cents. And that was this first issue. And the Black Widow saves Daredevil. She brings him up from the New York Harbor. And I read an interview with Conway. He said he always liked the Black Widow character. He just thought that
he always had a thing for redheads, as I recall.
Fair points.
No, I think we discussed that with him on one of the episodes.
Oh, the classic interview.
Yes,
that was it's a great episode. At number 700 something. So he wanted to put her into the book. He thought she would work well with Daredevil. They thought they'd have an interesting dynamic. And I got to tell you, especially when Colin draws her, the Black Widow is one of the hottest superheroines in comics. And so she comes into the book. She saves Daredevil. He doesn't realize she's saved him because he's unconscious. And she kind of leaves him there. But they're, of course, eventually going to meet up. And in issue 82, the Scorpion has been hired as one of Mr. Klein's operatives. And he attacks, and the Widow and Daredevil team up again. And during the melee, the Black Widow, it seems like she pushes Scorpion off a ledge, and he is seeming, quote, killed. It was an accident, but people accuse her of murder, essentially. And I should point out right off the get-go that Matt and Natasha, the relationship is not all hearts and flowers.
Yeah.
There's often tension. Natasha is Natasha, first of all, has her espionage history, which does come up a little bit in this era, even more down the road, which she clearly has torment about. And also, she's very torn about, I'm a very independent woman. You know, I don't like because remember the 70s when the feminist movement is really gaining ground, and comics sometimes blunderingly, sometimes more subtly are reflecting events going on in society, and so that they often have these arguments about her place in their relationship, and is it really an equal partnership and things of that nature. So
Now, at this point in her history, has she been involved with Tony Stark before prior to this?
well, she had fought Tony Stark in the Silver Age when she was
a villain,
an enemy agent.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of where, because I know she's had a lot of relationships as well. In
Oh,
the
yeah.
Yeah, I
Marvel
don't think she
universe.
was romantically linked to him
No.
until much later.
Yeah.
Okay.
She
Hawkeye, yes, she used him as a,
Yes.
a pawn against Iron Man.
And Hawkeye will actually,
okay.
in vintage Hawkeye form, he will show up one of these issues demanding Natasha get back together.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I do remember. Okay.
Yeah.
But remember, she first appeared in Tales of Suspense, and her costume was a dress and like a veil over her
Right.
face.
Yeah.
And then they gave her, I think, a costume with like a spider on it and like a mask.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then John Romita Sr. designed the classic Black Widow costume that we're all familiar with,
Right.
which I think first appeared in actually an Amazing Spider-Man.
It did.
Yeah.
Issue 86. Yeah.
Well done, sir. All right, issue 83. Conley will be writing the book now for several issues. He has his own run. This issue features two great Marvel Bronze Age artists, Alan Weiss, I've always think just has beautiful work, and Barry Windsor Smith is assisting, and Bill Everett is inking, not long before his death, actually. He'll die in 1973. And in this issue, Foggy is the DA of New York City, and he decides to try to prosecute Natasha for the, quote, murder of the Scorpion. Is the Scorpion's name Abner?
No, that's the Beetle.
That's the Beetle. What's the Scorpion? Matt Gargan.
MacDonald Gargan,
MacDonald
yeah.
Gargan. Thank you, sir. Yes. And, Matt, of course, doesn't agree with that, and he wants to defend Natasha. And the next issue comes out that Foggy is doing this because he's being blackmailed, again, by the mysterious Mr. Klein, who's revealed in this issue, finally, and this storyline was an Iron Man. Like, they carried out Mr. Klein a while.
Yeah.
That he's a robot from the future entitled MK-9.
Oh boy.
And
Quirky, you say?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And apparently, he came back from the future to save the future of the human race, and to do that, for some reason, he has to eliminate Daredevil and the Black Widow, because apparently something will happen that if they're not killed, the human race is in trouble. And I think two guys from the future show up, and I think they destroy the robot. And Matt and Natasha at this point begin their romance, their torrid affair, essentially. So that ends the saga of Mr. Klein / MK-9. Like the stories like this, you can't imagine them in like the Daredevil most people know of.
Right.
Like it's very much a whole different.
It's still
take.
more like a superhero book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Whereas what has become more prominent in the past 30 years of understanding Daredevil as a street level character, kind of,
Which I'm sure the Netflix show
noir
will show,
and
yeah.
things of that nature. But up until this point, it still was being written and trying new things as a superhero book.
Yep.
So
issue 85, Foggy resigns because he feels ashamed of the blackmail. He feels that he corrupted his office, so he resigns as DA. And there's a battle with the Gladiator, who's one of the classic part of Daredevil's Rogues Gallery, who has an interesting character transformation in the 1980s, which we'll get to.
Mm-hmm.
And Karen returns because she realizes Matt is alive, and they seem to reunite.
Just after he got up with Natasha, now he's going back to Karen.
Again, Matt Murdock, when you really look at his life, as admirable as he is, sometimes he's kind of a dick when it comes to women. I mean, he really is. Now, I should point out, and Myrtle will appreciate this, in issue 85, in the letter column, Let's Level with Daredevil, there's a letter from a young Mark Grunwald, which once again, you have that Marvel tradition of a lot of future creators, starting with Roy Thomas.
Hacks, yeah.
Their letters are appearing in the early part of fandom. Excuse me. In issue 86, Matt announces to the world that Karen Page and I are engaged.
Wow.
But Karen calls it off because she cannot handle the fact that he is Daredevil. So she returns in issue 85. 86, they announce engagement, and then Karen calls it off. And then Matt resumes his relationship with Natasha, who apparently is relatively okay with the fact that Matt, jumped ship that quickly and then got back on board, so to speak. So, their romance is rekindled.
And Villain Graham going on in the background of this issue. This issue shows us one of the many deaths of the Ox, of the Enforcers.
That's right. Please, Mert, I forgot about that.
Poor guy, strange and twisting path he walks. He's just kind of a big muscle-bound guy as a part of this group of enforcers who literally call themselves the Enforcers.
Yep.
Him and Montana and Fancy Dan, those guys. He at some point got into some kind of brain-swapping procedure with a mad scientist named Carl Strag, I think his name was. And Carl Strag then proceeded to die in the Ox's body. But in this issue, the Ox exposes himself to cobalt radiation or something, and that somehow causes the scientist's body, in which he was trapped, to mutate into a duplicate of his own body. Because radiation is the power of imagination in the Marvel Universe,
Absolutely.
apparently.
Yeah.
Just look at gamma radiation, mutations that cause...
Stan Lee co-created a whole universe out of it, essentially.
Basically.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened for the Ox. He fought Daredevil, and he ended up dying again. And then later on, it was revealed he had a twin brother. And
Oi, 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 with the twins.
I don't know if the twin brother has died yet, but it's only a matter of time.
But you can see the trend that Daredevil has followed basically in the footsteps of Spider-Man.
Like we talked about in the last episode.
So it's like you see the continuation of this. I mean, you're seeing in these issues that we're discussing. I mean, between the Ox, you're talking the Scorpion, Kraven comes in. So I mean, you're seeing all these Spider-Man villains still continue in these Daredevil stories,
And they will throughout the bunch of the Bronze Age.
Exactly.
Issue 87, again, Matt and Natasha now move together as a couple to San Francisco. Natasha's living off her inheritance. She's with her faithful manservant and protector, Ivan, who I don't even know if is still alive or even is used anymore as a character.
Probably not.
But he was always at Natasha's side throughout the Bronze Age. And I love this because, again, it's the early 70s. So what they do is Matt and Natasha live in separate rooms. So Natasha has the top floor of her mansion, and then Ivan and Matt live downstairs on the bottom floor. I guess they weren't ready yet to show them cohabitating in the same bedroom. So,
Canoodling.
Yes. Although it's and they explain to people that they're, quote, friends, essentially. But what's interesting here is that Matt Murdock is also making, obviously, his presence felt in San Francisco. He'll join a law firm. And Matt Murdock is with Natasha Romanov as himself in public. Yeah. So people are going to start to... And they actually deal with this. Well, Daredevil's hanging out with the Black Widow when they're doing adventures, and then Matt Murdock is her partner. So that question obviously is going to come up. Issue 88, again, I think one of the creepiest villains of the Marvel Universe is the Purple Man. We've talked about him in the last episode.
I think we have Bendis to thank for
exactly.
his creepiness.
Exactly. We talked about the Alias run. And he appears, and he's a recurring classic Daredevil villain. When we get to the latter part of the Bronze Age, he'll play a major role when it comes to Heather Glenn and her family. And Ivan reveals that, and this is where retconning really has taken place, that he raised Natasha since World War II. Yeah. Because I think her family were all dead, and he kind of protected her and brought her up. Yeah. I don't know how they address that today. Obviously, they can't say she was a child in World War II because she would be a much, much older woman. She'd be in her 60s, even 70s. Yeah. So that obviously has been retconned out. But that was the explanation. And I remember even when we get to the classic, when we talked about the X-Men, I think it was issue 268, with the classic issue where Wolverine and Cat meeting for the first time in Madripoor, and the Black Widow was there as a child. Yeah. And they work with Ivan to free her from Baron Strucker. So you've read that story. So she was a little kid. So I'm sure today they've kind of updated that one, if they've even addressed it at all. In issue 89, Kilgrave finds out that Electro's in town. So, again, the Spider-Man villain appearing. And they team up to fight, their hated enemy, Daredevil. They're defeated, and Kilgrave is, quote, killed. Obviously, he's going to return. Why don't you remind people what Kilgrave's insidious power is, actually?
Pheromone manipulation. He can cause people to do his bidding. powers of suggestion.
And in both genders, correct?
Yeah, but I think he's a little more effective on females. But
that's been elaborated on greatly ever since.
or at
yes.
least he kind of has a thing for manipulating the behavior of females.
Well, and the current issues that Mark Waid's doing. Have you read those yet, Pants?
A few behind.
All I'll say is the Purple Man has returned, and they're taking it in a very interesting new direction.
Okay.
And I'll just leave it at that. So when we get to the 2000s, we can talk about that. Now, issue 90, Natasha starts to talk more about her past as an espionage agent. Because remember, as we mentioned earlier, when she first appeared, she was a Soviet agent, and she was the classic anti-communist early 60s Iron Man stories. So she has that whole past, and she talks about an unfinished mission involving something called Project 4, which we're going to learn is this globe that has harnesses just incredible energies. And it was an unfinished mission, and she was hoping that she could obtain this globe before it fell in the wrong hands and that type of thing. So that's going to be now a recurring subplot going forward for several issues. Issue 91 has an interesting quote, which I think sums up the tension between Matt and Natasha. I've been your partner, Mr. Murdoch, but you haven't been mine. So, there's that. It is throughout this run, that they're at odds. And at this point, I should mention, and it's the next issue. They started entitling, as Pants mentioned, Daredevil and the Black Widow. Mm-hmm. And in issue 91, Matt, it's kind of like housekeeping. Matt needs a job. He joins a law firm, and there's going to be intrigue with that. And one of the partners in his law firm is an old college associate, Larry Cranston. Myrtle will know who this is.
Mm-hmm.
And who does he become in this issue?
Well, he becomes the third individual to use the identity of Mr. Fear. Yeah, and he actually made his first appearance in just like a cameo or a percolating subplot capacity in issue number 88.
Oh, thank
and
you,
that bears fruit pretty quickly here in number 90. Was it 91 or 92?
91. Yeah. Larry Zoltan Drago was the first Mr. Fear, correct?
Right. And
he was murdered by the Machine Smith or Star Saxon.
Right, and he died while he was using the identity of Mr. Fear, and then he became the Machine.
Put his consciousness into the machine body, and then Larry got his hands on what Mr. Fear's power is just to create just off the wall panic in people, right?
He has a gas gun basically.
Yeah,
it's kind of like the Scarecrow sans the whimsy. Yeah,
sans the whimsy.
Yeah, so it's just the original was a sculptor who accidentally discovered a gas that induces fear while he was trying to create living sculptures to help him take over the country or something. Perfect sense.
Fabulous.
He's a temperamental artist. But yeah, then Larry Cranston somehow found out about I think he presented himself as a relative of Star Saxons and was able to acquire his fear paraphernalia that way.
And Larry, find out, is like a spiteful and hateful towards Matt from their college days. And he tries to, and he's figured out that Matt is Daredevil because Matt is in
San Francisco
with Natasha, and Daredevil's there with the Black Widow. And remember, everybody knows Natasha Romanov is the Black Widow. She does not have a secret identity. Right. So, she doesn't wear a mask. So, he makes that connection, and they battle, and he ends up committing suicide. And there'll be other Mr. Fears after him.
Right. His nephew, Alan Fagan.
Yeah. I know I can count on murder.
He doesn't show up for a bunch of years after that. Sometime in the late 80s, I think.
Yeah. And then in the... I think it's the Carl Kiesel stuff in the 90s. There's a Mr. Fear appearance we'll talk about.
There was a female Fear. She called herself Shock, I think. She didn't go by like Miss Fear or Ms. Fear. Or
on so many
Lady
levels,
Fear
I'm always
like
glad you're here, Mert.
Very early 90s kind of character.
Yes. And issue 92 begins the masthead that Pants mentioned, Daredevil and the Black Widow. And this masthead will remain in place through issue 108. And those are some of, when I was buying back issues of Daredevil in the 80s when these were very cheap, I always loved getting these issues because, again, I just really enjoyed, even as a kid, the Daredevil Black Widow, plus the Black Widow was hot, right? The Daredevil Black Widow dynamic. And this issue's fun because we find out that T'Challa, the Black Panther, close to my heart, out of his friendship for Matt Murdock, he puts on the Daredevil costume and he acts as Daredevil, and then Matt and Daredevil appear together in public. So now people think, oh, Matt Murdock is not Daredevil. All right, issue 93, I thought that this villain is just classic 70s. Damon Dran is a multi-millionaire organizational genius who is also paranoid about the possibility of nuclear holocaust consuming the Earth. So in order to save himself from that, that paranoid inevitability, he gets his hands on the Project 4 Globe of Power, and he transforms himself into a being called the Indestructible Man. And, this is so he can protect himself from the possibility of nuclear Armageddon. And, of course, he goes on a rampage. And there's a character called Danny French, who is an old espionage associate of Natasha. And he's there to help them and to try to finish out this mission. And ultimately, in issue 94, the final melee, both Dran and Danny French are killed. French kind of sacrifices himself to ensure that the Indestructible Man is defeated. These stories are not, if you're talking about, like, essential Daredevil, these are not issues I would say you have to read. But
for the completists, myself,
Yeah, but they're fun. Kevin, would you agree that?
Or they're quirky.
It's not that it's not that they're horrible.
No,
it's just the choice of these villains that they decided to try to. I think obviously trying to establish a rogues gallery, and again keeping with that superhero motif, of still being a superhero book, but they're not. I would never say avoid them.
No, absolutely not.
They're still worth reading. They can be quirky, but they're not awful.
Well, speaking of quirky, in the next issue, Man Bull. Murray, could you quickly give us the Man Bull's origin, please?
Oh, yeah. Well, this isn't his first appearance.
I know.
But
Yeah.
he was a street-level thug, called himself Bull Taurus. His real name was William Torrens. Yeah, that was retconned later on.
It's like it was destiny.
And so he was working in a press gang, basically, a bunch of local toughs who'd been hired to kidnap people for medical experiments with animal hormones to try to create super soldiers, as many,
Of course.
many people of questionable intent were trying to do in the 60s and 70s. And when he was trying to capture a young couple, and they got away, and for some reason his boss, I think it was Mr. Klein,
Probably.
was upset with
He was
him
everywhere.
for having. So Mr. Klein gave the order that because Bull Taurus let these kids get away, he must become the subject for the experiment for which the young couple was intended. So he was injected with a bunch of bull glandular secretions from
I
a
thought
bull.
you were going to say bull semen for just a second.
They put him on steroids.
They force-fed him Rocky Mountain oysters until he and he ended up mutating into a large, taurine creature
Just from the
with
cover,
horns and everything.
it sounds like he's speaking. I am Bullman. You make me mad. Ugh.
Well, sometimes he's written that way. Most of the time, though, he's still more or less coherent and can speak English.
He actually showed up in one of the Wade issues recently.
Oh, really?
Yes, very briefly.
He was dispatched very quickly.
Yes,
but,
it
yeah.
was a special issue. Might have been in the 50th anniversary issue.
Yeah.
I think it was with that issue, yes.
He was dispatched. So he's still around.
Could he speak in complete sentences?
He was.
He was defeated rather quickly, so he didn't much to say.
Me and Mambo, like Bizarro.
But he wasn't very well educated to begin with.
No,
but he was,
no.
Okay.
It was at least verbal.
Doesn't make him a bad person.
It's just a muscular man with a basically
Something else made him a bad person.
Exactly.
Because he definitely is one.
a muscular man with a big bull head, essentially.
When I'm looking at the cover, you hurt Mambo, made people put him in prison. now you must pay. Me angry.
Well, issue 95 and 96 is the Man Bull Saga, and
The Mamble Saga.
And
got a whole
Nobody's
saga.
ever put it that way.
and they're in the melee. Daredevil's actually shot and injured. Daredevil's been shot many times in his history.
yeah.
Now that I think about it, and it turns out this is classic. The Man Bull is so outraged that he's trapped in this form that he wants to turn all of San Francisco to look like him. So he's not the only in this agonized solitude of being the only person who's a Man Bull. So he has the serum that turned him into this. So he's going to put it in San Francisco's water supply. This is like the Joker, right?
Won't dilute it at all.
Yeah. And the idea is, but Daredevil stops, and the battle of the Man Bull again seemingly drowns. He'll be back though, before the Bronze Age is even over. So, Steve Gerber is going to start to phase in as the writer. So in issue 97, Conway and Gerber are plotting together, and these issues have such a Steve Gerber imprint on them. I'm a big Gerber fan. I love his idiosyncratic approach. And in this issue, there's a street performer named Mordecai Jones. He's giving a performance, and he's attacked by a vicious dog that his owner loses control of it. We should note that Gene Colan was a huge dog lover. He loved to draw dogs any opportunity he could. One of the reasons why in Tomb of Dracula, Quincy Harker always had his dog with him to protect him. And Mordecai Jones, by some mysterious entity we'll learn about later, is transformed into a being called the Dark Messiah. And the Dark Messiah will have disciples that'll come to him. We have to remember this is the early 70s, so cults are also, sort of in the zeitgeist at that time. So he's going to become an issue for a little while. Daredevil defeats him, but he's going to show up again. And we jump forward a couple issues to 99. Now Gerber is writing Daredevil. He's the writer. And this issue's fun. First of all, we got the great Sam Queskin doing pencils and Sid Shores doing inks.
Yeah, I love Sid Shores.
Phenomenal. And I remember you said in the last episode you thought Shores was one of Colan's greatest inkers. Actually.
Yes, I believe. That's my opinion. But.
No, I think he's way up. He and Tom Palmer are way up there.
Yeah.
This issue, Hawkeye comes back. He's quit the Avengers in a snit, one of many times he's done that. And he shows up at their house in San Francisco saying, all right, Natasha, I'm here for you. I want you back. And Matt's says, really? And they, of course, it's Marvel, so a battle's going to break out. And this time it's over who's going to end up with the Black Widow. And she's angry because she doesn't like because the Black Widow is a very independent-minded woman. She doesn't like the idea of two men demanding that she be with one of them. She's, well, I'm going to make up my own mind. The hell with both of you. And ultimately, Daredevil and Hawkeye, they stop their battle. And this is leading to Avengers 111. We probably mentioned this in our Avengers Bronze Age episode from last year, but I'll just review it quickly. It turns out that Magneto, by manipulating the iron in the blood of many of the X-Men, the Avengers, are controlling them bodily and getting them to do his will. So the surviving Avengers who are not being controlled get help from Daredevil and the Black Widow. That they go to New York and they help defeat Magneto. And then Natasha decides to stay in New York and join the Avengers. Now, we should point out that the Black Widow has been affiliated with the Avengers many times up to this point. Myrtle always grimace at the classic Lady Liberator story. There he goes.
Shaking my head sadly.
Yeah. As much as I love Roy Thomas, this is a more ham-handed attempt at addressing the rising feminist movement in the early 1970s. Again, it's issue 80-something. I forgot the exact number, but it's an Avengers issue certainly well worth reading. But she joins the Avengers formally now. And this is one where she and Matt, on more than one occasion, will sort of like these mini breakups during their torrid romance. But she's only going to be with the Avengers for a very brief time at this point. She'll have a much longer tenure with them later on. And this takes us to issue 100. I remember the cover. Yellow with Daredevil in the foreground. I think various elements of his history behind him.
Yeah.
It's Colin, so it's fantastic artwork throughout. John Tartaglione is doing the inking. And this is pure Gerber. Matt, because he's in San Francisco, so the Rolling Stone offices are in San Francisco. So he saves he saves the Rolling Stone offices from a robbery. And then Jan Wenner says, hey, how about an interview? So in the comic book, Jan Wenner is rendered interviewing Daredevil.
Oh, my goodness.
Again, Marvel always has those moments where they would want to appear topical and try to kind of tap into the zeitgeist of the time. And Gerber was always a great writer for that. And this issue, this is vintage Steve Gerber. Vintage. Angar the Screamer attacks. Murd, begin.
Most kind of you.
Indeed.
His name is David Allen Angar. He's a down-on-his-luck rock and roll singer.
Yep.
And he's been contacted by a shady lawyer named Kerwin Broderick. I believe we eventually learn is just acting as an advance man for Moondragon.
Yes.
Although he has sinister designs of his own. But he acts as the middleman. He contacts Angar, brings him in, and allows Moondragon to perform clandestinely some titanian operations on his throat muscles, giving him the ability to induce vivid hallucinations through screaming. So he becomes like a living LSD factory, I think is how he's actually described in the text of one of the stories.
Love Gerber.
Master of the Mind Storm.
And didn't he have a headband?
Yes, he was dressed in
ragged
full
jeans,
hippie
like a vest.
gear. Yes.
Yeah, he had that like the leather vest with
No
the
shirt.
fringes on it, and
And wasn't Songbird, which was screaming Mimi with him at some point?
That
later
was
on?
a retcon.
It was a retcon?
I'm pretty
Okay.
sure, yeah. That's something that Kurt Busiek, when he was building a backstory for what happened to Screaming Mimi, that brought her to the Masters of Evil.
Okay.
And how she ended up a part of that group and thereby a member of the Thunderbolts.
So Angar attacks, and Matt is having these hallucinations. He doesn't understand why, because he hasn't never encountered Angar the Screamer before. And in the next issue, 101, the Black Widow returns. She's with the Avengers for about 5 minutes. It just doesn't feel right to her. She goes back to Matt in San Francisco just in time to help him against Angar. Angar escapes, though, but he'll come back. Because Murd mentioned Moondragon. That's a subplot that Gerber is going to carry forward shortly. Issue 102 is interesting as an historical note because it's the first Chris Claremont script at Marvel Comics. I want to say this is about 1972. Claremont had been sort of like a intern or office boy at Marvel when he was in college in the late 60s. And he's actually credited in the early 70s with a plot idea for an Avengers story involving the Sentinels. I want to say 101 or 102 that Roy Thomas wrote. But this is his first script. And what better way to start your scripting Marvel than having the Stilt Man appear in your book? I remember in our last episode we were really having a lot of fun talking about just how absurd the Stilt Man is as a villain. But he's been a Daredevil mainstay throughout the character's entire run. And he's still around, I believe.
Still.
Yeah.
Who?
The Stilt Man.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, some version of the Stilt Man is still around.
What is it?
I don't know if Wilbur Day is still
Wilbur
around.
Day,
but,
that's right.
Oh, and speaking of stilts, I think I've stuck a big telescoping foot in my mouth a few minutes ago. I'm just looking at Comic Book DB here. Apparently, Angar and Screamin' Mimi did have a history before Busiek got his hands on them.
They did. Okay.
Yeah, I'm seeing that they appear together in an issue of Avengers Spotlight when Hawkeye was headlining.
Yes.
So, my apologies. Apparently, Busiek did not make that up, but leave it to him to be. He's one of the few people who remembered that those characters had a relationship.
I adore Kurt Busiek's work. Now, issue 103, Kevin has been referencing this several times, and it always works. A Black Widow, Spider-Man, and Daredevil team up. Spidey and Daredevil team up. Frankly, I forgot who they fight in this issue. It's not. I don't think it's a particular...
Ramrod, according to the cover.
Oh yes, he's the third of the bad guys that
Moondragon's manipulated.
Right.
Yeah. Not a memorable villain by any stretch, which is why I just forgot about it.
Just a big cyborg bruiser. That's all he is.
But was there a He-Man character named Ram Man?
Ram Man.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I think you have a toy when you pop it. All right. Anyway, interesting little footnote. The covers in the 70s, a lot of them were done by either Gil Kane, who was a go-to cover guy, or John Romita Sr. This cover, this might have been a Heck cover, or Heck Romita, I don't remember which.
Let's see. Cover artist, John Romita Sr.
Okay. The Black Widow image on it was used for the 1975 Marvel Slurpee Cup when 7-Eleven had a whole series of cups.
Yeah. Right.
At the RetroCon, I picked up a Clea Slurpee Cup because I never thought you'd see multimedia with Clea on it from Doctor Strange, and I bought Murd the Adam Warlock Slurpee Cup. So,
I thank you for that. I've put it in my kitchen right next to the Adam Warlock Toon Tumbler.
Honored, sir. Mine is on the bookcase at Wild Pig because, believe me, you never want to drink out of these cups. Issue 104. Once again, Spidey. Daredevil takes on Kraven the Hunter, who has been hired by, is it the lawyer who hires him to go after? I forgot.
I do not know.
He's been hired by somebody. He refuses to take the money because to him it's all about the thrill of the hunt. But of course, Daredevil survives that encounter. Now this is where things, and I was wrong because I wrote here the first appearance of Moondragon. It's not. That was my error. But Jim Starlin does have a creative role in this issue. He's involved in the penciling with Don Heck. We should mention, by the way, Don Heck, really one of the founding fathers of the Marvel Universe. He doesn't get as much attention as Kirby or Ditko, but he was right there from the get-go. I think he drew the first Iron Man appearance over Kirby layouts. He did a lot of the early Avengers issues. Mm-hmm. Very important artist. Tomorrow just released a wonderful hardcover chronicling his entire career in comics. Yeah. It's a great book.
It's in the studio here somewhere. Someone took it home with them.
It's an excellent book.
What was it? The Don Heck
book?
Heck.
Tomorrow's Don Heck book. And, Murd, why don't you just explain to the audience, because Moondragon has a very involved history. Because we're really talking about Thanos here and Drax and all that stuff. So
She's
fire away.
A character that I fully expect to see in a Guardians of the Galaxy
very likely,
sequel at some point. Okay, so her real name's Heather Douglas. She and her parents were making their way back from a trip to Las Vegas at some point. At exactly the wrong point, unfortunately, because somewhere out there in the desert, a probe that Thanos had dispatched crash-landed and knocked their car over. Thanos saw to it that those in the car were killed, just to make sure there were no witnesses. So that means Heather Douglas's parents eliminated. But the young Heather had been thrown from the car, so she was spared. But then Mentor, who was Thanos' father, and ruler of the colony of Eternals living on the Saturnian moon of Titan, came by to observe his son's handiwork. Thanos had long since split the scene. So he found this baby, picked her up, and decided, okay, I'm going to atone for some of your sins here, son. Took her back up to Titan, where she was raised with the Eternal Children there, taught by the monks of Shaolom, I think it was. And she, despite not having the eternal advantages, the genetic advantages given them by the tweaking of the Celestials years ago, despite being just a plain old human amongst Eternal Children, she kept pace just through sheer determination, strength of will, became a model pupil of the monks, the priests, and they taught her more than the others were able to learn. She eventually became a cosmic level mentalist, very, very powerful psychic abilities. She also became extremely arrogant, but she was determined to avenge herself against Thanos. And so I think the main reason that she assumed the guise of Madame McEvil and came down to Earth and started creating minor and fairly silly supervillains in the first place was she was trying to create more superpowered beings on Earth to help defend the planet against Thanos and ultimately defeat and destroy him. And her father, as a sidebar here, eventually became Drax the Destroyer.
Yeah.
He was resurrected by Thanos' grandfather, I believe, Kronos, who was also an Eternal, but a disembodied Eternal that had evolved to another stage of being after... he had been. This is getting us very far off track, but
It's riveting, though, Mert. It's riveting.
He was an Eternal also before the Titanian Exodus, and he had performed a laboratory experiment that created an explosion. I think it destroyed his physical body, but it endowed the Eternals of Earth with virtual immortality.
I'm glad we had this departure, though, because it just goes to show what Kevin's emphasizing before, how all over the place Daredevil is in this time period, that they're bringing in this cosmic character, essentially. Did she first appear in the Iron Man Thanos stories? Okay.
Yeah, she did.
So
I'm finding that Jim Starlin apparently did not directly participate in the creation of that issue, but I think he must have had some input.
In the issue we're talking about right here?
Well, in the Iron Man issue.
Oh, in the Iron Man issue.
It was
okay.
number 54, I think. And
So-
Thanos' little first appearance cameo was in the very next issue.
And Moondragon has... Usually, I could say she's benevolent, right? I mean, she's not evil.
Arrogant,
Yeah.
imperious, but
Yeah.
there have been times when she's actually... her behavior has swung towards the evil side.
Yeah.
Like after the Korvac saga,
Yeah.
I think that was when she mentally enslaved an entire planet. Babanus.
That's pretty awful.
Yeah, they were locked in a centuries-long war, and she decided she was going to come in and just take over their minds and just solve the problem that way. Because she had been influenced by Korvac's thinking. He was he was a former cyborg. He thought the universe should run like clockwork, remove all free will, and you'll also remove all suffering. And Moondragon kind of came around to his way of thinking.
And she's been in Avengers stories. She reunited with her father. I remember them appearing the Death of Captain Marvel graphic novel.
She accidentally killed her father. Yeah, that'll mess you up a little bit.
So in these stories, Moondragon, in the guise of this villainess that you've talked about, has been manipulating all these servants, essentially, these enforcers, like Angar and Ramrod.
And Dark Messiah,
And
too.
Dark Messiah, thank you, and his disciples. And we find out issue 106, Matt has been part of this law firm because, he has to make a living in San Francisco. And he finds out the head of the law firm, his last name is Sloan, is actually secretly a crime lord trying to take over all organized crime in San Francisco. And so they come into battle. And during these issues, Moondragon uses her powers to temporarily restore Matt's sight.
Yeah.
But he finds that because he's so reliant on his radar sense that his fighting style is no longer effective because he just can't fight effectively with full vision without his radar sense, essentially. And she'll actually restore his blindness during these stories. Issue 107, Bob Brown begins his 30-issue run on Daredevil. And I remember these stories very fondly because this is where a lot of the back issues I picked up as a kid were all the Bob Brown rendered stories. What do you think of Bob Brown's art, Kevin?
When I first got introduced to it, I thought it was very generic.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing spectacular about it for me. It actually kind of turned me down on the book.
Yeah.
I became less interested, put it that way. Because to me it's such a generic style that it lost a good feel for me. I mean, again, you're going from Colin
Gene
to
Colan.
yeah, and then going to Bob Brown. I mean, he still told the story fairly decent, and it's not like he had this really quirky style where anatomically everybody was.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean it's just
No,
it's
he's
just
a
one of
solid
those very
draftsman,
just he just it's just kind of generic. That's the best way I can put it. I don't want to say boring because that's not true, but it's a departure obviously from what we were used to. But I found myself grow tired because again, I came at it as I looked at comics and I appreciated artwork. That's what drew me into comics was art. Before I actually started reading them, I was always intrigued by art. So that's always my mainstay. I love the art. That's my first thing that I like to look at and with a comic, and then I read. So having that and getting engrossed into the runs of Daredevil when he came on as the artist, I became less interested in the book.
Pants, do you have any Bob Brown original art?
I do. I mentioned before I have a Batman family page.
That's right.
He drew with
Okay.
Batwoman in every panel.
Okay, so in the mid-'70s, he was very active. Unfortunately, he'll die of leukemia in 1977. So in issues 107, 108, it's established that Matt is also attracted to Moondragon. And she also acknowledges the attraction, but she says, my place in the universe, it's not something I can really afford. And so there's this very brief triangle between Natasha, Matt Murdock, and Moondragon, which, doesn't last long. We find out that Deborah Harris, who'd been around in the Silver Age, she kind of vanished for a long time. She's like Foggy's femme fatale. We find out they're engaged. They will get married, I believe, and then later on they'll get divorced.
Yes.
And we find out that Foggy's shot by a sniper. And I can vividly recall this cover, Foggy in a foreground sort of blow-up box, in bed, prostrate, Foggy shot. And then the Beetle appears, in the front cover. And these two issues, a lot goes on. The Beetle shows up, the Marvel subversive group Black Spectre, which I'd actually forgotten about until they were used in the Mark Waid Daredevil run that's going on right now. And Captain Marvel also appears. He was very big in the 1970s.
Sure.
In these stories. And we're going to find out that down the road from this a little bit, when Heather Glenn is introduced, that her father is involved in all these behind-the-scenes machinations.
Yeah, he has his own business, Glenn Industries.
Yeah, so that's going to come back. Now, issue 109 is when we have an appearance by the character Necra, who's working in concert with Black Spectre. Murray, what's Necra's main power? She's that pale white-skinned...
Yeah, she's a living vampire.
That's right. Like Morbius, then.
Yeah,
Yep.
except she was born that way. It's a mutant talent for her.
Well, I remember reading my research just today, actually, that a white scientist and a black cleaning lady, Shane, you'll love this, were both near a nuclear test site, and they were both irradiated. And something happened where, the scientist had, this black kid who was, ape-like, and then he started to mutate, and then the cleaning lady had this pale-skinned baby, and, one kid was, cast out by the kid was cast out by the father, the girl ran away, and they kind of met up, and they bonded, and that's Mandrill and Necra. And issue 110...
Bonnie and Clyde of mutant terror.
Yes, well put, sir. And because they were treated really badly in their upbringing, so they're going to lash out now at this humanity that is, mocked and rebuffed them. And issue 110, it's Gene Colinar. So Colin comes back, for this issue. He's drawing Tomb of Dracula at this point. And this is the first appearance of the Mandrill.
Well, it's, again, not his...
Oh, I apologize, sir.
Not his first appearance. I think it was... He first appeared in an issue of Shanna the She-Devil, I believe.
You're right, because Shanna will come into these stories. You're correct, sir.
But
That's
either
right.
way, I think he's a Gerber creation.
Without question.
Yeah.
And so what's your take on the Mandrill?
Apes sell comics, Chris. And mandrills are just such colorful creatures, too. They're the kind of ape that have those big red patches on their cheeks and the big blue noses.
It's more like baboon type.
Yeah, exactly. Their body type and facial structure, they look like baboons, but with those oddly bright-colored patches on their faces. And this mandrill, whose real name is Jerome Beachman, looks just like a mandrill, except he's humanoid. I don't think he even has a tail.
No, he's totally humanoid except for his head, basically.
Yep, he's got unusually long arms too.
Yeah.
And he just wears. He has the whole ape appearance thing going on, and he also wears a cape with a high neck collar.
Yep.
And he has the ability, kind of similar to that of the Purple Man, to control other people's behavior through pheromones. But unlike the Purple Man, as you've already pointed out, Chris, the Purple Man can control people of both genders pretty much equally well, whereas the Mandrill's pheromone powers are much more effective on women.
Yes. So we find out that Mandrill is controlling Black Spectre.
Who are made up almost entirely of women.
They're wearing padded uniforms. They find out that they're all women. And is that still the case with Black Spectre today? I don't know. I can't answer that one.
Yeah, that's.
And he's on a quest to, gain revenge for the way he and Necro were treated and abused as children. So he's a very hate-filled character. And in issue 111, Shanna the She-Devil teams up with Daredevil. So this, as we just pointed, this is a crossover from her very brief series. And Mandrill has enthralled Black Widow. And he also sends the Silver Samurai. So that's an early appearance by that character.
That is his first
It's his
appearance.
first appearance? Okay,
yeah.
thank you. He doesn't look the way the Silver Samurai looks today that we're accustomed to him. And, they engage the Silver Samurai in battle. He does escape. And, of course, he becomes a major character in the X-Men later on. And in issue 112, again, Shane, these are the moments you enjoy especially. The Mandrill seizes the White House, and he puts a huge effigy of himself on the front lawn of the executive man, just to let everybody know that he's now in charge in the Oval Office. But, of course, Daredevil and Shanna and the Black Widow is freed. They defeat Necra and the Mandrill. And I think you think the Mandrill has died, but I'm sure that doesn't last. So that's... To me, the Mandrill is just a consummate Bronze Age villain. I mean,
without a doubt,
it's love it. Any thoughts on the Mandrill, Kevin? You look a little nauseous there.
It's not nauseous. It's just the fact that I know you appreciate him for the reasons you appreciate them. But most people, you got
to take it a grain of salt. I mean, that's
I understand that, and you being such a Gerber fan,
yes.
I mean, there's like a select group of people that are just enthralled by Gerber stuff,
yes.
And if you're not, then that's
ludicrous. It's totally ludicrous. Totally ludicrous, but very much a keep with the tone of Daredevil's Bronze Age.
Yeah.
Now, issue 113, we bring in Foggy's sister Candace, who has only been introduced some issues before this, and until then, you never knew Foggy had a sister. In fact, Matt didn't know he had a sister either.
Right.
And there's allusions to the fact that Candace is like the, quote, black sheep in the Nelson clan. And issues 113 to 115, we have to remember that Steve Gerber at this time is also writing his classic run on Man-Thing. So he's going to bring Man-Thing into the Daredevil book. And Candace was a journalism student at Empire State University, Peter Parker's alma mater, the fictitious Marvel Universe college. And she was investigating the disappearance of Ted Sallis, who, as we all know, is the human alter ego of Man-Thing before he was transformed. And why did Sallis disappear, and also what happened to the formula he was working on and the accompanying notes. And her life is put at risk because of this. It turns out, and Daredevil goes to investigate, and he meets up with Richard Rory, who, as we all know, is Man-Thing's sort of Rick Jones-type sidekick. And it turns out the villain Death-Stalker, who's probably the most important Daredevil villain in the Bronze Age, besides Bullseye, he's after Sallis's notes, too. And I want to comment on what Death-Stalker's power actually is. And actually, he's a villain that appeared in another guise, I think, before he was the Death-Stalker.
Yeah, he called himself Exterminator.
Exterminator, that's right, with the Ani-Men. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
He was unfortunately, I don't remember his secret identity.
Yeah.
Philip Sterling is the guy's name.
I knew I could count on you.
Yeah, but he's been kind of a question mark for me, too. I haven't read any of his appearances. I don't know what his motivations are. As far as his powers go, I think he's out of phase with
yes, he can phase through things, and he has like a death touch.
Yes.
Like if he touches you, it's just agonizingly cold, and ultimately you can die from it. And he wears, a huge, almost like black Stetson.
Yeah, brimmed hat, yeah.
And he has like a You can't see his face. He has like his collar up. He's all in black, like a cloak, billowing cloak.
Kind of sounds like the cover of the Stephen King Dark Tower novels, that gunslinger. High hat,
Yeah,
big
to some
tall
degree.
collar.
And he's historically important because Frank Miller's first issue of Daredevil is the climactic battle with the Death-Stalker. And many people are familiar with that cover, even if they haven't actually read, where Matt's in a graveyard, kind of on his knees, and the Death-Stalker's looming above him.
Yeah, coming through a tombstone.
Coming through a tombstone, that's right. And that tombstone will be important in that story, which we'll talk about next time. So Matt's investigation ultimately clears Candace of wrongdoing. The Death-Stalker is foiled. The Man-Thing kind of shambles off after he, in his own way, helps Matt and Richard Rory. And in the next issue, 116, Candace is cleared. The Owl appears again. Most of Daredevil's mainstay villains from the Silver Age, many of them do show up again in the Bronze Age. And issue 117, Natasha and Matt have a heart-to-heart. And Natasha says, I'm going to stay in San Francisco. And Matt decides it's time for him to return to New York City. Now, this is not the last we see the Black Widow in Daredevil. She's going to come back actually very quickly. But they've established once again that their relationship is tumultuous. This is probably not going to be for the long haul, essentially. These next 4 issues are one of my earliest Daredevil reads as a kid. I was always really obsessed with Hydra. In the 4-part story, there's a new version. There's been many versions of Hydra, many offshoots of Hydra. This Hydra turns out to be run by Silvermane, the old Magia crime lord, with his I think his son is Blackwing, and there's a different
Introduced
operatives.
in issue number 118.
Thank you, sir. And they abduct Foggy because it turns out that Nick Fury was going to, for reasons I find inexplicable, was going to recruit Foggy as an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a goofy story. And Daredevil and the Black Widow returns to New York, and they take on Hydra, and Foggy tries to make up with Natasha because she's still bitter about him prosecuting her over the Scorpion thing, a couple of years before that. And ultimately, they defeat this Silvermane version of Hydra, essentially. In the next issue, Natasha now leaves kind of for good. She says, I have to go off and find myself. I don't know. I have to see who I am without Matt Murdock, essentially. So she leaves, and Matt remains in New York. This issue is just a one-shot written by Len Wein, and again, Colin is doing penciling here as well. And then the next issue, Marv Wolfman begins his run on Daredevil, issue 125. And right off the bat, he introduces Heather Glenn, who, as we mentioned, will become a new love interest for Matt, now that Karen Page is gone, and the Black Widow is gone, and Moondragon never really went anywhere. And she also has some elements to her past that are going to be troubling, her family history. This all introduces the character Torpedo. Not the villainous Torpedo, though. It's, what's his name? Something Brock.
Brock Jones.
Yes, thank you, sir. And he was murdered in the middle of something, just popped up, and then went back to what he was doing. Magnificent. And he'll become a benevolent version of the Torpedo. And, of course, there's a misunderstanding between him and Daredevil temporarily because he thinks it's the villainous Torpedo. So Heather Glenn will start to become a love interest for Matt. As Kevin mentioned, she really becomes prominent in the Miller era. And she doesn't meet a good end either, as we're going to discuss later on.
Find that out, yes.
Issue 128, the Death-Stalker comes back again. He'll appear several times in the Bronze Age, and that'll culminate with Miller's first rendering of the character on the Daredevil title. I had to mention issue 129 just because, my God, it's the Man-Bull and the Matador teaming up.
How did they get anything done?
And we talked about the Matador in our last issue. I remember our last discussion. We talked about how the Matador is such a D-list villain. Even the Scourge didn't kill him in the 1980s during that era. So apparently in this story, you think the Matador has been smited by an enraged Man-Bull, but of course he resurfaces. If you don't, anybody doesn't know from the audience, the Matador is one of Daredevil's first opponents. Is it Daredevil 2?
No, it was issue 5.
Oh, Electro was number 2. Okay.
2 was Electro.
And he's a Matador with a cape.
That's it.
And he commits
That's all you
crimes.
get.
So,
That's all you get.
Yep.
He's just there to provide the motivation. He waves the cape, and the Man-Bull does the rest.
Man-Bull would be a little distracted by
Yeah.
the cape. It's got to be pointed at the bank.
So, issue 130, because Matt is trying to sort of rebuild his life because he's back in New York. Natasha's gone. He decides to open a legal clinic because remember, he's a brilliant lawyer to help people in need. Issue on 131 is a landmark issue in Daredevil's entire run.
So it's cheap, right?
Not in high grade, unfortunately. It's Wolfman creates Bullseye. And Bob Brown is still drawing the book, by the way.
it is. Yeah, you're right.
And this is Bullseye's first appearance.
And Klaus Jansson's inking at
Yes.
this time.
And
Which made I mean,
what a great
I give
inker.
Klaus a lot of credit.
Yeah.
I mean, he's his
look at
touch on
the
a
work he
lot.
did with Frank Miller, my God.
Yeah. I mean, but that's what I liked about going back to these issues, because when I saw, I guess when I saw these first, I really didn't pay that close attention. And then after I, was more prominent with Klaus's work, and then I went back and saw that how he was already on some of these books years before and working with all these different brilliant artists that, I was like, God, that was such a cool thing.
Yes. He's a great inker.
Yes.
Now, Bullseye, as we all know, he appears, of course, in his classic costume, not the stupid leather jacket with the tattoo on his forehead.
God.
That's much later on.
And what's
And
stupider?
in these early appearances, you don't really have the full-on creepy psychopath Bullseye
No.
that you're going to see later on.
That comes later on, yeah.
He's an assassin,
Right.
and he never misses. And they establish right away he can basically make anything into a weapon, and kill people with it. And it comes on this issue that Heather's father is a slumlord. So they're starting to establish that there's shady goings on in his past that are probably going to have fallout on Matt and Heather's relationship. Murd, the next 3 issues, it's the Jester. And have you read these stories?
I haven't.
Okay, it's issues 135 to 137. Basically, the Jester is running riot in New York City, and he's basically trying to smear Daredevil's reputation and frame him for wrongdoing. And it's just the Jester going all out and just sheer, mischief and mayhem. I want you to remind people very quickly, because the Jester has a very interesting little backstory, essentially.
Frustrated actor Jonathan Powers believed he's his generation's greatest actor and determined to prove it. And to make himself more hireable, he trained himself in acrobatics, gymnastics, swordplay, everything except acting lessons. And, and eventually, he's reduced to the level of a stooge for like a pie-throwing, old-fashioned vaudeville comedian. That's the last straw for him. He decides he's going to make the world acknowledge his genius by turning to crime and staging these grand jests.
And he's been trying that ever since.
Yeah.
Because he's still around.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's appeared in the most recent Daredevil.
has, yep.
Mark Waid,
Yeah, but he's finding some new angles for his mischief, though. I mean, Dan Slott used him in Amazing Spider-Man not too long ago.
That's right.
He'd found a way to use the internet to record his jests and pranks and acquire celebrity that way.
So thank you, sir. So in these issues, he's I think he's using television to his advantage, if I remember correctly, and he's just trying to make Daredevil look really bad in the eyes of the public, and it's just oddball Jester antics. Ultimately, of course, he's defeated. Issue 138 is actually a crossover with Ghost Rider number 20, because Ghost Rider's been on the scene now, and I think this is the last appearance of Karen Page.
It is
in Daredevil.
It is
until Born Again.
Bill Born Again,
right? Yep.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah,
So-
I have here, the title of it is "Where is Karen Page?"
Yeah.
So another one of those Marv Wolfman question titles, just like "Who is Donna Troy?" which
Yep.
he'd write a bunch of years later.
So, well put, sir. So, there's a team up there, and Karen is in danger. Frankly, to be honest, I forgot which villain is involved in the story. And, everything works out, but she remains in California, and she continues her acting career. So,
And who drew this issue?
I don't remember.
John Byrne.
Yep.
That's right. Thank you, sir. Issue 138 or the Ghost Rider issue?
No, the 138.
138.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So that's some of his earliest work at Marvel.
It is.
I think his first Marvel work was a giant-sized Dracula, if I remember correctly. And he did Charlton before that.
Yeah, he was in Charlie, yeah.
Well done. But, we won't see Karen again until mid-1980s.
Yeah.
So, and then, of course, she's going to be around for a while after that. 141, Bullseye shows up again. I remember this issue particularly because doesn't he, tie Daredevil to, a big crossbow? And he's, going to shoot him, in a mountain or something like that? I mean, it's almost like this goofy, Superman moment, with some wacky, huge death trap.
Sounds like
essentially.
something Captain Boomerang would
Yeah.
do.
Or
In
some
fact,
kind of,
it's literally something Captain Boomerang
Yeah.
did to the Flash, tied into a giant boomerang.
Yeah.
sounds
So,
like a Dick Sprang Batman thing,
exactly.
too.
So, Bullseye has the really cool power, but he's not. Miller is who makes Bullseye into the villain that we're familiar with today.
The real psychopath.
yeah.
Yeah.
Issue 143 is Wolfman's final issue on Daredevil, so he left us Bullseye. And also Bob Brown's, again, tragically, he'll die later that year after a struggle with leukemia. Now, you mentioned this in our intro, Kevin. Issues 146 is a Gil Kane drawn. Because remember, Kane did covers throughout the 70s. It's the first time he's doing Daredevil interiors. And I remember it's Bullseye. I remember the cover where Bullseye's like using cameras, like he's on a television monitor.
Yeah,
and Daredevil's like lurched over in pain or something like that.
It was his plot to, same type of thing that, he fought him in, and it was in like a television studio.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And obviously it was being recorded and televised for the national broadcasts, And it was a 2-issue story, right?
Yeah, I believe, yes. And remember, Bullseye was always fixated on the fact that he couldn't beat Daredevil. Yeah. And that's a recurring motif with that character, essentially. We find in issue 147 that Heather's father, the reason why he's been acting so seedily is because he's been under the control of the Purple Man. Kilgore has been manipulating him into doing wrongdoing. This is also Gil Kane, and actually Jim Shooter scripting this issue. I'm not sure if he's editor-in-chief yet at this point.
No, he's not.
He will be soon, though.
He will, yeah. He is by the 79. I'm sure. I don't know if it's before 79, but in 79 he was.
Definitely, yeah.
He was definitely the editor-in-chief.
Issue 150 is the first... I'm sorry, Mer, go ahead.
A sad word about issue number 147.
Please.
It was the last monthly issue of Daredevil.
Well done, sir. I missed that.
It was at that point that Daredevil was given the dreaded demotion to the bi-monthly schedule.
Yeah.
And it remained at that schedule for the rest of the 70s, I believe.
Yep. And again, as Kevin mentioned, once Miller really takes full creative control of the book, after Mackenzie is unceremoniously axed, the writer Roger Mackenzie, that's when the book starts to really build and become a phenomenon.
Yeah.
Issue 150 is the first appearance of the Paladin.
Yes.
Sort of the roguish mercenary. What's his basic gist, Merd, the Paladin?
He's a roguish mercenary.
Yeah. I mean,
he's fond of the color
He doesn't
purple.
have power, right? Yeah, he is fond of the color purple.
Yeah, he has no superpowers.
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
carries
no powers.
firearms, and he's got the devil may care attitude going on, and he's kind of like a purple-wearing Han Solo kind of figure.
Essentially.
He's not a smuggler, but he is a mercenary, and he's never been given a backstory, as far as I know. I don't think his real name's ever even been revealed.
I remember in the classic Avengers stories, the Masters of Evil take over the mansion. He actually helps out the Wasp. I think it's like a flirtation between them. In this issue, Maxwell Glenn kills himself because he's been totally framed by the Purple Man. His whole life is ruined. His company, everything's been destroyed. And I remember these issues as a kid, just a quick little nostalgic moment we all have when it comes to comics. I was in 5th grade, and one of my friends at the time, his family was fairly well off. He lived in a pretty big house, and they had like this huge playroom. And you would walk in on like an elevated stairwell, and the room was below you. The entire floor was just covered with comic books. Just no rhyme or reason. I remember you were walking through them, basically, and toys and whatnot. And I remember I picked up Daredevil 151. It's probably one of the first Daredevil comics I ever actually saw, because I was 10 or 11 years old. And it's Heather Glenn yelling at Matt. His mask is off.
Yeah, he's in the Daredevil costume, but has his mask off.
And she's blaming him for her father's death, because what happens is he goes to her apartment, his cowl is off, and she walks in, and she finds out about her father having killed himself. And, that begins the real tumultuous up and down of their relationship, which will not end well, ultimately. Issue 152 with Roger Mackenzie. Now, Roger Mackenzie, he did a lot of writing in horror comics.
Yeah.
Eerie, creepy, that type of fare. And he begins scripting, and he's going to take a kind of a darker tone with Daredevil.
He does, and it's I always said everybody associates Frank Miller with 158, and don't get me wrong, it's a landmark thing.
Yeah, but Mackenzie was writing.
it, and Mackenzie wrote it up until 168.
Yep.
So I mean, Miller was only the artist for 11 issues, before he took over as total creator of the series, and so a lot of the stuff that and that's what I like. That's why I remembered. With
that classic Hulk issue you've mentioned, he wrote that, yeah.
And with Gene Colan coming back on the book,
yeah,
and Roger Mackenzie writing it, that's when I grabbed those issues, because I saw him fighting Cobra to Hyde on the cover, and I picked that up, and I was like, wow, this is good. I like this, and it really that's what got me kind of back into it.
And you're correct, because Colan returns, and he's penciling now once again.
Yeah.
And these whole first issues are about dealing with the fallout of Glenn's death and the Purple Man.
Right.
And Daredevil's taking on various villains who the Purple Man has employed. And in issue 154 to save Heather. I think he's fighting like throngs of people controlled by the Purple Man, essentially. I don't remember if the Purple Man seemingly dies in that issue or not. I don't think so.
I don't think so.
He's defeated.
Yeah.
He seemingly died a lot.
Yeah. So yeah.
Seems to me his most definitive death was in like a Marvel graphic novel at some point. Dr. Doom, I think, captured him and hooked him up to some kind of amplifier, trying to use his
I don't remember that. Wow.
his pheromone-based mind control powers.
Yeah. What? Which
Was
one
it Emperor
that?
Doom? Emperor Doom?
That could be it. That could be it. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Murd is always pinch hitting.
That death didn't stick either. Of
No.
them.
Well, issue 155, this is a Daredevil supporting character that has appeared a lot, which is Becky, the secretary. I forgot her last name. She's in the wheelchair.
Yes.
She was throughout the 80s, and she still pops up. She's a lawyer now herself, actually. And she's hired as the secretary for
Becky
Matt's.
Blake?
I think that's
That's
correct.
what it says here.
Then that's correct.
Oh, yeah, well then.
And she becomes Matt's and later she'll work for both Matt and Foggy.
And Foggy, yes.
Remember, Matt is not with Foggy right now.
I was wondering.
Yeah,
that when you
Foggy.
just
I
said
should
that.
have. Foggy is still trying to pursue like his political career as a DA. Even temporarily was going to run for governor at one
Right,
point. That
right.
didn't work out. So I mean, they're still obviously close, but they're not partners at this point.
Right.
That'll of course return later on. And the last two issues we're going to talk about here, which is the kind of lead up to issue 158, which we'll pick up with in our next installment of this series on Daredevil. Death-Stalker has returned. Now he's making his final play here to really like beat Daredevil. And Matt ends up in a coma. And I remember the colon cover of issue 156 where he's battling himself in the yellow, black, and
Yeah.
red costume in a boxing ring.
Boxing ring, yep.
And so he's having, in his mind, he's having this struggle with himself while he's in his coma. And Black Widow brings in the Avengers to try to protect him and help him against Death-Stalker. Great colon artwork.
Oh, yeah.
And no one drew the Black Widow like colon. And this is going to culminate in issue 158, which we'll pick up where Miller will become the penciler. We'll also talk about next time about his first drawing of Daredevil in Spectacular Spider-Man with the who's the dopey villain with the drape on his head and the
You're thinking of the Masked Marauder.
Masked Marauder, yeah. So that's that in a nutshell, Pants, is Daredevil in the Bronze Age. Closing comments, gentlemen.
Sounds quirky.
Quirky. That's what I can think of is quirky.
Sum it up in one word.
But I mean, there's just there's groundwork laid for things that happen in
Oh,
the
absolutely.
future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
For
I don't know if
the
it,
history of the character.
I don't know if
but-
it was groundwork. It's good that people came back and remind that
Well,
stuff.
yeah, that's true. I mean,
I mean, I don't think they forethought.
no
what
one's
would
fully
happen.
formed as a character when they
Yeah.
first appear. Like Bullseye, for instance. But his first appearance is still very important.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, sure. And again, it just is part of the thing of the rotating writing, staff. Is that it's just it again, like you say, it's not like this was like a 3-year run, of this guy and whatever.
Right.
That they had this long term thing
Yeah.
to write out and have build these plot lines and stuff. They just did their short window of time and try to do what they could do with the character, and But
They had Man-Bull. And
but a
Hydra.
lot of these things, there's a couple of things that are in this run that are very prominent and that curtail into some really significant stuff. That happens
Absolutely. And I
with
would say to anybody like Pants who has all these issues to be read,
Mm-hmm.
don't pay a lot for them.
Oh, no,
but they're worth reading. I mean, they're
Yeah.
just listen to what we've been describing. Come on, how can your interest not be piqued by some of these wacky, fun?
Oh, yeah.
And plus, the Daredevil Black Widow stuff is great. That's
That's-
really fun.
That's like the foundation of
Yeah.
of this run. That
Absolutely, because she's there at the
it's
end
consistent,
when she's
yeah.
helping him
Yeah.
with the Death-Stalker. So
Do we have anything from the notepad over there, sir?
Oh, yes, I do have some additional
Please,
quirks.
sir.
Go
please.
right ahead.
All right, so talking of strange villains, okay, I'm going to throw out Copperhead here.
oh, that's right, two-parter.
Wow,
Yep.
124 and 125.
Right off the top of it, you don't even need an list of cats. I am impressed by your memory for issue numbers, Kevin. That's,
I'm trying to utilize it while it's still there.
please do, because I certainly never had it to begin with. I can never remember numbers. But yeah, he was created by Wolfman and Ween, and he was kind of like a pulp vigilante pastiche.
He looked cool. I mean, to me, as
He had
a
a trench coat and a fedora.
trench
right?
coat, a fedora, and he had that
A metal
glimmering
mask.
skin. Yeah, that face. And then when he killed somebody, he would put the pennies in their eyes.
That's right.
And I was like, it was so. I mean, and again with the art that because Kane was doing the covers and stuff, and that's what I remember him by. And he to me, it's so simple, but to me,
Yeah.
it really stood out. I was like, wow, this is really cool. I mean, I really would have liked to seen something happen with that character. Wade.
It's not impossible.
No, it's not.
Oh, do you remember the Daredevil Spider-Man miniseries? I think it was Paul Jenkins and Phil Winslade.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, they brought back a version of Copperhead for
They
that.
did. Okay.
Right.
And also a version of Stiltman.
Stiltman,
Very
yeah.
mean version of Stiltman. All right. So, but yeah, he struck a chord with somebody because they introduced a new Copperhead somewhere in between, those 2 points. Let's see. Oh, now we're all familiar with the infamous Captain America number 319, the issue where Scourge
yes.
kills off 17 supervillains in the bar with no name.
Ah, here we go.
2 of those villains appeared in Daredevil comics of the 70s. All right, the first was introduced during that Shield Hydra story that you mentioned, which was written by Tony Isabella.
That's right. Isabella wrote those.
Very
yes.
brief, like 5-issue stint on the
Yeah.
title. El Jaguar.
That's right. he was a Hydra operative. Yes.
Right, exactly. And then, I can't believe you didn't include this in your notes, Chris. Issue number 133. It was Daredevil teaming up with Uri Geller.
Oh,
Yes.
Merd. I apologize.
Yes, to take down Mindwave and his fearsome think tank.
And they did the whole spoon bending thing in the
My
issue.
arms
and
are
all
raised
that.
in supplication.
That character appeared in that issue, and then he showed up at the bar with no name to die.
He must have been a Gerber creation, I'm guessing.
Well, actually, Wolfman.
Oh, it was Wolfman. I
Yeah,
apologize.
Wolfman, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Wolfman wasn't really trying too hard there. He was didn't want to, sully the reputation of any existing Marvel villain by having him involved with Uri Geller, I think. But anyway, yeah. Then Rick Remender actually brought him back. Then
Great.
just in the last few years.
Just great.
Yeah. So anyway, what else did I have? Oh, somewhat overshadowed by the first appearance of Bullseye in number 131, a character called Detective Burt Rose. From my sources tell me that he
Your sources.
he was a nameless comicbookdb.com. That source.
You don't have to reveal your sources.
He first appeared in Daredevil number 1 apparently.
That's
as just
right.
A
Yep.
nameless cop.
That's
and then
right.
Here he just
Got a name.
They brought him back and kind of made him into like Daredevil's version of Harvey Bullock. Because he was a NYPD officer who did not care much for Daredevil. And so he hung around for maybe a year to make Daredevil's life a little harder. I think, an important supporting character first appeared in number 153 in 1978, Ben Urich.
Oh, that's right.
wow.
Oh, Merd. Shameful.
That's
Shame on me.
yeah, holy cow.
Shame on me. Oh,
My goodness.
what issue number was
It
that?
was number 153.
Oh, man.
And so
Shame on me.
He just slipped in there by maybe 6 months. It was a part of our
So Mackenzie created Ben
target
Urich.
range.
Yep.
Yeah.
And of course, as many listeners probably know, when we get to the 80s, Urich becomes a huge supporting character in
Oh my
Daredevil.
God, yeah. I mean,
Huge. Probably the most important besides Foggy.
That's why.
Supporting character.
And I know him well from the Bendis run
Yeah.
in Daredevil.
Yeah, I mean that's why we'll talk about it more when we do the next spotlight. But I mean, I really, feel that Mackenzie deserves to get the credit that I feel so rightfully so.
He
I mean,
deserves at least some of the credit. My God.
but because of the significance of Frank Miller and
Yeah.
his impact on the character,
He gets overshadowed.
he gets
Yeah.
overshadowed because everybody's. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people think, oh, Frank Miller started Daredevil 158. That was
Right.
they don't even remember that Mackenzie was
Yeah.
on the book. They don't even bother to even probably even acknowledge it because it's just so associated
Yeah.
with Frank's
Yep.
impact on the character. So, but Mackenzie started this stuff, and that's why I said the tone of the book changed for the best,
I agree.
for the better. When Mackenzie came on the book, I really enjoyed when he took over and started to do this stuff. And you can see, obviously, with Ben Urich and these other things that will just, create so much opportunity for future stories that they utilize what he set out and started to do.
Merd, thank you. That was outstanding, sir.
I wasn't sure what issue it was.
Yeah,
I
I'd
actually
forgotten about
wasn't
that.
100% sure, and I didn't even think that it was significant. But yeah, 153. Good job.
A little surprised to learn that his first appearance was this early on.
Yeah.
I'll have to go check that out. I have to go home and check
I
that
remember
out.
reading that, but I'd forgotten about it. I didn't include the notes. Merd, thank you so much, my friend.
This is why I'm here. I'm just here to pick up the scraps.
Oh,
you gentlemen leave
Oh, you're
Fine.
so much more than that. Come on. Don't hide your something under a bushel. What's that phrase?
Don't hide your light under a bushel.
Thank you.
Any
that
other-
that
I will
too.
not.
Any other notes worthy of mention, sir?
Two more bits and pieces.
Sure.
As far as annuals go, there was really only one in
right.
the 70s that was in original content.
Some are reprints. Yes, correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So number 4, in 76. That was Daredevil teaming up with Black Panther and Namor. And that was written by Chris Claremont and Marv Wolfman.
Wow.
Art by George Tuska. And that was the last Daredevil annual we got until Atlantis attacks.
Yeah.
Oh my
In
God!
the late
'Cause they did
80s.
like a giant size, and I mean, it's some things like that. But
Yeah.
the annual itself did not. That's why when you were saying about 13 annuals, I was like,
Okay.
Well, sometimes when they'd say the giant size or king size, that was the annual essentially. It was
right,
called king
right,
size
right,
special
right.
or something
Yeah.
like that.
And they were mainly reprints.
Yes.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
And last thing I got here, you said we're going to talk about the Spectacular Spider-Man story next time?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Daredevil did make one appearance outside of his own title I thought was worth mentioning here. The famous Incredible Hulk story. I don't think it was officially called The Trial of the Hulk, but that's what it was.
Right.
Oh,
It was
he's the
issue
lawyer,
one-
right? He's Bruce. He's the
152,
lawyer.
152, 153. Yeah,
I can
remember
see Matt Murdock on the cover in the courtroom with the Hulk's going berserk, basically.
Yep.
Yes, that's
'Cause
right.
I think the second issue of that wasn't that the cover. Like it was just like the Hulk in like standing in this pose.
Yes,
like in
I can picture that cover.
You know,
Yeah.
and that because I bought that issue, not obviously understanding that it had Murdoch in it or something, but it was one of those Hulk issues that caught my eye, and I picked it up, and oddly enough, it had Matt Murdock in it. That whole trial thing. Yeah.
And later on, when Matt Murdock made his first TV appearance, it was in
Oh,
The
wow.
Trial of the Hulk,
Oh my goodness.
When we get to the 80s, we'll talk about that one.
Yeah.
1989.
All right.
Black body stocking. Pants, I think we've shot our bolt.
Wow. Again, very educational, very informative. It's infotainment.
And this time a little bit quirkier.
Yeah, a little quirkier. And again, like I said, I have many of these issues, and I just, with everything else, I just want to read everything. I want to take off. I want to put pause on the world and just sit in a corner and read for like months.
What
on
are we
end.
anticipating for the next one then?
I thought we'd do
158 until
because the 80s that's a lengthy
yes, it
period.
is. That's why I was curious.
I mean, we may just want to do just the Miller stuff.
Well, how long was Miller on the book?
Well, okay,
190-ish, I think.
he goes from 158 as penciler, and as Kevin mentioned, he eventually becomes the full creator
Right.
with Klaus Janson, and he's on it to like 190,
191.
191.
is his last issue
You could do Spotlight on Daredevil in the Miller age. if
Yeah,
you feel
and then
so
and then he
inclined.
comes back,
in 217.
yeah,
Well,
and
or
the
219.
220s for Born Again.
And there
So
was
there's,
some
there's
talk
stories in between.
Yeah, he did one. He did one. It was like 217 or 219. He did like a one issue story, and then obviously he
and
comes back
Mazzucchelli's
on.
penciling at that point.
We'll get
then-
back to you, but
and
we,
then-
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
we'll figure it out.
yeah.
It'll be in all the papers.
But yeah, so I was just curious to see how we're going to segregate the remaining.
We'll confer.
Okay.
And we won't rush it because there's a lot of good stuff in
Oh, yeah,
there.
that's-
Oh my
that
God,
I gotta,
yeah.
I gotta dig out the
That's a detailed discussion.
visionary.
That
for
I
that.
mean, honestly, the 158 to 191.
That's
I mean,
that
is-
could be an episode
That could be an
itself,
episode.
yeah.
in
that may
itself,
just be
exactly.
one in itself. We'll decide about that
Yeah.
later, and again, we'll let you know. All right, if that's it, no one else anything else to say? Again, very enjoyable. Thank you very much. And Shane, wrap it up for us.
This episode was brought to you by InStockTrades.com. Go to their website for anything Daredevil trade paperback or hardback related, especially the most recent runs are readily available. And like the website says, if it's on the website, it's in stock. Visit us at comicgeekspeak.com. To send us an email, the address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. To leave us a voicemail, the number is 267-702-6642. Stop by The Comic Forums and comment on this episode. Tell us about your Daredevil experiences in the Bronze Age. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. We would like to thank everyone who contributes to this show. Kevin, thank you for stopping by.
Thanks for having me. Always.
Come on all the Daredevil episodes.
I plan to.
And, as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.